Thank you for tuning in to the Voice of Adventure. Today we will be exploring a new story called The Door. A man finds a new door in his house that he has never seen before. Exploring the room, he finds it full of enjoyment and pleasure. This room holds a dark secret. Where did this door come from? The man asked, staring at the door that had appeared out of the blue. The man knew this house well. He had grown up here. He had run through the halls playing with his siblings. He had snuck girls in through the windows. He knew this house extremely well. And all that time, he had never saw this door. It sat in the small hallway that led to the kitchen, right next to the door to the basement. He studied the door for a long while, and it looked like every other door in the house. He wondered how, in all the years he'd lived here, he never noticed it. Curiously, he grabbed the door handle, wanting to know where it led. But the door was locked. Looking at the floor, he saw flashes of colored lights under the doorframe. It went from red to green to blue to yellow, almost dancing between them. With the door locked, the man dropped to his knees and peeked through the keyhole, hoping to catch a glimpse of what was on the other side. With his face against the door, he looked through and saw a strange haze obscuring his vision. But what he couldn't make out felt indescribable. The colors that were dancing felt alive. The world on the other side of the door felt serene, as if it was made with limitless imagination. It looked like a world full of excitement, but the door was locked. Disappointed, the man sighed, wishing to visit the perfect world on the other side of this door. As he stood, the man felt a small weight in his jacket pocket. Reaching in, he pulled out an old brass key. He looked at the key for a while, not knowing when or how this key came into his pocket. Looking at the door handle, he noticed it was also made of brass, the same shade as his new key. The man quickly fumbled the key into the lock, hoping beyond anything that this was the key he needed. His curiosity about the new door and the sudden appearance of this key were quickly pushed aside, as he was now desperate to see what lay on the other side. With the key finally in place, he held his breath as he slowly turned it, silently praying that it would unlock the door. Once he heard the metal latch slide open, he breathed again. Pulling open the door, he finally got to see the full world. Lights danced across the air as he stepped in. The haze still obscured the details of the room, but it oddly enticed him to explore. He walked through the haze, following the dancing light, feeling things he had never felt before. Excitement filled him as he reveled in how this place made him feel. The freedom, the excitement, the pleasure. It was all so great he didn't want to leave. He wanted to stay and explore the seemingly endless land beyond this door. But sadly he had to leave, as his outside life called to him. Reluctantly, he walked back through the mist and out the new door. But he would be back. The experience he had there was like nothing he had done before. The world outside could offer nothing compared to that. As days and weeks passed, the man spent more time in this new room, enjoying the freedom he felt. But the longer he spent in the room, the shorter the joy he felt lasted. On his first visit, he rode the high for days. But now, as soon as he left the room, the joy was gone too. Every moment outside of that room became agony, as nothing could compare to the thrill and freedom of it. However, all his time in the room made him neglect himself on the outside. He hadn't showered or changed in days. His hair was a mangled mess as he had not combed it in weeks. He lost considerable weight as instead of eating, he spent more time in that room. But none of that mattered until he accidentally saw himself in the mirror. Standing in his bathroom, hands gripping the sink, the man stared at his reflection, unable to recognize the face that greeted him. How can this be me? he asked himself. What happened to make me look like this? Why haven't I been taking care of myself? The man spent hours standing there looking at what he had become. He felt an odd mixture of rage and sorrow, both directed at himself. How could he have let it go this far? How could he have not seen what was going on? Is he even worth fixing? That last question hurt the most, because a part of him said no, he wasn't worth fixing. The man felt weird asking himself that question, but some voice in his head posed it, and that part of him kept saying there was no use changing things now. He would just end up back here eventually. It said no matter how much he changed, this was now his life, and nothing could free him from it. The man fell to the floor. Tears streamed down his face as he realized that this wasn't the first time he let things get this far. This wasn't the first time he stood in front of his mirror, asking himself if he was worth fixing. Countless times he had stood there, seeing the monster he had become. It all came back to that room, that magical room that brought endless joy. But only while he was in there. In truth, it was stealing his joy. It was stealing parts of himself to fulfill the ego-driven, self-centered monster that lived in that room. And that monster might also be a part of him. As he sat on the floor, he felt an urge to forget all of this and go back in that room where he could be happy again. He knew there was no true joy or happiness in that room. It was all a lie. But still, the desire to go back there felt overwhelming. In there, he could forget all this sorrow and pain. He could forget the suffering it was causing. He could forget about his life outside the room, because it wasn't as exciting as the room. How do I ever get out of this? He asked himself as his tears splashed on the tile floor. Can I ever be free? Can I ever be free from the pool of that door? Every time the man found himself staring at the monster in the mirror, he told himself, never again. This was the last time I'll ever go in there. But it never was the last. He would ban himself from opening the door, lock it and hide the key, and even barricade it. But none of it could completely seal off the door. No matter where he hid the key, he always found it back in his pocket. No matter what he used to block the door, he could always clear it away. Alone he sat with no answers, no solution, no more tears left to shed. He remained there for a long while, hugging his knees, afraid that once he left, he would go right back to that room, even though he knew that room was the reason he was in this state. His stomach groaned for food, but he still didn't move. Then, in the midst of his suffering, he felt a presence sitting next to him. It felt warm and welcoming like a breeze on a warm summer day. It gently placed its hand across his shoulders and embraced him. The man looked, and no one was actually there, but he could still feel its energy next to him. It didn't say or express anything. It just sat with him. For hours they sat there, until eventually the presence expressed its desire. It wanted the man to be free, free from that room, free from the guilt, free from the sorrow and pain that room had caused him. True freedom from it. And that was it. There was no catch, no hidden motive, nothing it seemed the presence would get out of it. The man felt unsure about this. In his life, he found that everyone has a motive behind their actions. They all want to gain something from every exchange. Why would this presence be any different? It has to have some secret objective, the man thought. But somehow he knew that was wrong. Even though it was his first time meeting it, he knew that this presence wanted nothing but the best for him. But still he felt uncertain. He didn't know if he was worth it, if he was worth saving, if his life was worth fighting for, because it would be a battle against that door that had trapped him for so long. Nothing had worked to free himself before. No matter what he tried, the man always found himself back in that room in moments of weakness. And who could say that this presence would change that? Even if the presence helped, he would still have to fight against his every desire not to go right back into that room. Was it worth the struggle when he knew it wouldn't last? In the midst of his tears, he heard the presence whisper, "You can fight this. You can be free." Suddenly he felt a warmth wash over him, and his despair began to fade. This had to be the presence. Somehow this presence brought him a sense of peace in his tormented mind. For the first time all day, his mind felt clear, his body felt light, and he knew what he needed to do. Before he could stop himself, the man grabbed some leftover planks of wood and nailed them over the door, sealing the entrance. With every strike of the hammer, he recited, "You won't have me anymore. You don't get to poison me with your false feelings or corrupt my mind with your lies any longer." With each nail, his confidence grew. Maybe this would be the time he would finally be free. Maybe this presence would bring him out of the cycle of despair. Once the door was sealed, he stuffed the keyhole with paper and glue, trying to make it impossible for him to unlock. Then, as a final touch, he painted these words on the planks of wood: "Only lives beyond this door. These planks protect my freedom, and no more." Satisfied, he stepped back and admired his handiwork. This was the first step towards his future freedom. It was a difficult step, but it was a step worth taking. The man put his hands in his pocket and felt the cold metal of the key. Oh, how he wished he could get rid of this thing, as that would solve all of his problems. It would permanently lock him out of that room. But any time he threw it away, it always appeared back in his pockets a few minutes later. Even with all this in place, and the being with him, the man still felt the pull of the room beyond the door. His body wanted to see and experience the joy and wonder again. His mind wanted to be free from the stress and responsibilities of life and enjoy the numbness that came with that room. But no, the man refused to let those thoughts permeate his mind. He forced them out, reminding himself of what that room did to him. In defiance of his body's desire, the man turned from the door and went about his new life. He wished that was the end, but every day he walked past that boarded up door and remembered the fun he had on the inside, the bliss of being cut off from the world and its many struggles. But he also remembered standing in his bathroom crying from losing himself in there. It was a daily battle, and even with the boards up and the keyhole jammed, and the words on the boards, he didn't always win. More times than he wished, he found himself back in that deceiving room, back in the lies and bliss. But now, he had someone to help him. When the man stumbled back into that room, the presence came and showed the room for what it truly was. The presence showed off all the lies that this room was disguising. And seeing the light, the man quickly left and boarded up the door again. Each time this happened, the man grew stronger. He resisted the pull of that door for longer. He left that room faster each time he entered. And even though this was a battle he would fight for the rest of his days, he was prepared to continue struggling until he no longer succumbed to the door's pull. Thank you for listening to The Voice of Adventure. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to follow wherever you listen to podcasts. You can keep up with the stories and see extra content on Instagram at Josiah the Author. See you in the next story.